So the new trend for colleges these days has been to completely remove standardized testing, and it started with the University of California system, which eliminated the SAT and ACT completely for all sorts of college admissions. Many people claim that standardized testing is very unfair to disadvantaged communities, and as a result, it should be removed as a criteria for college admissions. This means that colleges should focus on only your GPA, your personal statements, and your extracurricular activities to admit students. However, I feel that this has actually backfired, and the college admission system is actually more unfair as a result of the removal of standardized testing. While this doesn't affect all colleges equally, it significantly affects colleges that are in the top 20 or top 30 in the United States. So in this video, I'm going to be making a case for why we actually need standardized testing and why the removal of it was actually a bad idea for top colleges in the United States. So let's get on with this video. Hello everyone and welcome back to the Striking Talks channel, and I'll be your host, The Striker, and in this video I'm going to be making the case for standardized testing in college admissions for top colleges. One of the claims that people often make is that standardized testing is actually not a good predictor for getting into college, and instead people should rely on statistics such as GPA instead. While GPA can be a good system and a good predictor at times, there are various times when it actually fails. First is highlighted by a statistic that over 47% of high school seniors have an A average. This just shows the amount of grade inflation that can happen at these schools. In fact, that's the other main problem with GPA. You see, GPA can vary from school to school, and sometimes even between teacher to teacher. Various teachers can have a very strict or a very lenient grading system. And across schools, you can have schools that are very lenient in giving A's to students, and you can have schools that are very strict and conservative with the amount of A's and B's that they hand out. As a result, GPA can be an extremely subjective measure of a student's success. Standardized testing, on the other hand, is standardized. It is the same across the entire nation. Getting a 30 on the ACT in California is the same thing as getting a 30 on the ACT in North Carolina. Your standardized test score is standardized, and it stays this way across the entire nation. Another criteria that's commonly utilized in college admissions are your extracurricular activities. Of course, the role that these activities play in your admission can vary from college to college. For most colleges, they play a fairly moderate role. It's something that colleges want to see on your application, but you don't have to go completely overboard because your GPA and your standardized test scores are what are actually more important. Having that good GPA and having good test scores is what's going to get you into this college. However, at your top 20 and top 30 institutions in this country, they actually rely a lot more on your extracurriculars. Now, why might that be? This is because the average standardized test score of admitted students can be in the 100th percentile. For example, for the ACT, the average score of a student admitted to an Ivy League is a 34, which places you in the 100th percentile. So all the students that go to these Ivy League and other top colleges in the country, they're the best of the best, and having a high score is an expectation. Of course, with test optional policies and the removal of standardized testing, these colleges will have to more heavily weight your extracurricular activities, which have a larger weightage in these top tier colleges. A big problem with having such a high weight for extracurricular activities is that it's very subjective. In order for colleges to compare one student to another student, they need to have an objective measure, which is why colleges will assign numbers and assign values to your extracurricular activities so they have a basis to compare the various students. But here's the issue with extracurriculars at times. Colleges are assigning objective values to something that can be very subjective. How is one extracurricular more valuable than another? How do you differentiate between that? Of course, with standardized testing, it's an objective standard, so you don't run into this issue. However, the problem with standardized testing, as I stated earlier, is that it is more of an expectation at these top colleges. So you can't differentiate between students based on their standardized test score when all of the students that are applying to your college are literally in the 100th percentile in the country. There's also another problem with extracurricular activities. Many people are quick to point out that ACT and SAT scores are very income dependent. Meaning, if you come from a family that has a higher income, there's a higher probability that your parents are able to afford, say, a private tutor or a counselor who can help you get a higher score. If you're somebody who comes from poverty, there's of course a lower chance that your parents are able to afford such amenities. As a result, your standardized test scores could be lower than those who have access to such resources. However, the same thing also applies with extracurriculars. Numerous studies have shown that students who are in families that make more money are more likely to participate in extracurricular activities, first of all, but they're also able to participate in more higher level extracurricular activities because they're able to afford it. And if you come from a place of poverty, you're less likely to participate in extracurricular activities, and you might not be able to participate in activities to the same caliber as the more rich students. So given that there is an income disparity problem with both standardized testing and extracurriculars, I think it's better for colleges to actually weight standardized testing more, because although it is also affected by income, it is at least a more objective measure, where with extracurriculars you're taking a more subjective approach. Of course, although adopting standardized testing as a requirement would work for most colleges in the country, as I stated earlier, there's still a problem with the top tier colleges in our country, and it's the fact that standardized test scores are highly inflated at these top colleges. Score inflation has actually been a trend in recent years, and we can take a look at this by looking at the test scores at the University of Michigan. In the 2012 to 2013 school year, the average ACT score at the University of Michigan was a 30. However, right now, the average has actually risen to a 33, meaning there has been a 3-point score inflation, and a similar trend exists across all the other top-tier colleges in the country. So given as GPA has been inflated, test scores are being inflated, and extracurriculars being extremely subjective, what can be done? Well, I think the solution is to make standardized testing more difficult. Yes, I know many of you might hate this idea and think that standardized testing is just torture. However, I think it's necessary to make standardized testing more difficult to relieve the bottleneck at the top of the pack. What do I mean by this bottleneck? Well, the average ACT score over the last 20 years has remained a 21. However, as I stated earlier, at the top of the pack, at these very top colleges, ACT score continues to inflate higher and higher. So what the solution should be is to make it harder to achieve a perfect score, a 36 on the ACT or a 1600 on the SAT. And this can be achieved by making these tests more difficult. Now, of course, I don't advocate for making standardized testing as difficult as it is in places like China with their Gaokao system, but I do think it is necessary to make standardized testing more difficult to relieve the bottleneck at the top of the pack so students have more room to grow and show their potential to colleges. Overall, I think there is a very strong case across the entire nation to make standardized testing a requirement once again. This is because, although it does disadvantage several students, it disadvantages them far less than extracurriculars do. Also, while GPA might be a consistent predictor of student success, we see that it continues to inflate more and more, and makes it harder for colleges to compare one student with another when there are so many discrepancies between high schools, whereas standardized testing is the same no matter where you take it. Finally, I think there's also a case to make standardized testing more difficult for the students at the very top. Of course, if you're not in the top 90th or 100th percentile, this change won't affect you. However, for those who are at the top, standardized testing should be more difficult so colleges can more accurately discern which students are the best from the best. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed what you saw today, make sure to leave a like, subscribe, maybe leave a comment, turn on notifications, and have a great day. Peace out, folks.